Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 1069 for August 11th, 2024. Coming up in a few minutes.
That's a real that's our first massive milestone. 3 years old, we finally become whiskey again. So it's, just a really proud moment for everybody here at the distillery, really.
The revived Brora distillery in Scotland's Highlands turned 3 years old earlier this year. Of course, the distillery has been around since 1819, but was closed from 1983 until 2021. Andrew Flatt is the distillery host at Brora, and we'll talk about the revival of Brora later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. I'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Behind the Label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Small batch. How would you describe it? It's like an Irishman's understanding of baseball. Extremely limited.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Gabriel Cardarella from Jewers here. The 2024 U.S. Open Championship may have ended, but you can still get your hands on the whiskey created to honor it. The new Jewers 19-Year-Old Champions Edition. Trust me, a whiskey you don't want to miss. More details coming up.
Let's get started with the week's news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. We've talked about the impact last year's tax hike on distilled spirits in the UK has had, both on spirits producers and the economy at large. But the UK isn't the only country where taxes are on the rise. Australia just raised its excise taxes for the second time this year to $103.89 per litre of alcohol. That puts Australia only behind Norway and Finland in the ranking of countries with the highest taxes on alcoholic beverages. Australia indexes its alcohol taxes to inflation and adjusts them twice a year based on the cost of living. In the U.S., Nebraska Governor Jim Pillen wants to jack up the state's excise tax rate for distilled spirits by 287%. The tax rate would go from $3.75 per gallon to $14.50 per gallon. Pillen wants to raise so-called sin taxes to cover the cost of property tax relief, but critics say the taxes will be passed on to consumers in the form of higher prices. After 6 years, Master of Malt is shipping to the U.S. once again. That's because the online retailer was sold this week by ZX Ventures, the venture capital unit of Anheuser-Busch InBev, back to its founder, Justin Petsaft. The deal puts all of Adam Group back into Petsaft's hands, including the Adam Brands drinks business and the distributor Maverick Drinks. Master of Malt was unable to ship to the U.S. under Anheuser-Busch ownership because the company holds licenses to brew beer in the U.S. and couldn't operate a retail alcohol business at the same time. Master of Malt is starting out with shipping to 26 U.S. states and plans to expand that number over the next few months. In other news, Four Roses unveiled the 2024 limited edition small batch bourbon this week. It'll go on sale next month and is a blend of 4 bourbons using 3 of the 10 Four Roses recipes with ages between 12 and 20 years. It's master distiller Brent Elliott's annual exercise in creativity.
This limited edition release that we do every year is really the best example of how we can truly create something different every single year. And it's really the most fun I have every year, getting to go back and revisit some of these really special older barrels that have been set aside just to potentially be used in these limited editions. And I think this year's, it doesn't disappoint. It's definitely different from years past. It really demonstrates different characteristics that you can find in any one of our individual mash bills or yeast strains. But it brings them all together in a harmonious way that's interesting and ultimately just delicious.
The limited edition small batch will go on sale September 14th at the Distillery in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, and the Visitors Center at Four Roses' warehousing and bottling plant in Cox's Creek, Kentucky. It'll also be available at select retailers nationwide in the U.S. with a price tag of $220 a bottle. I received a sample this week, and I'll have my tasting notes for it in a few minutes. Washington State's Woodinville whiskey is about to release its oldest bourbon yet, an 8-year-old whiskey matured in heavily toasted and lightly charred barrels. It'll go on sale this Saturday at the Distillery in Woodinville, Washington, and hit retailers around September 1st. The price tag is $129 a bottle, and once again I'll have my tasting notes for it in a few minutes. Tennessee's Chattanooga whiskey has 2 new releases. The Spring 2020 vintage bottled and bond wheated bourbon that uses malted wheat in the mash bill instead of raw wheat, and batch number 39 in their experimental single batch series. The Harvest bourbon uses raw and malted rice, along with malted oats and triticale as the flavoring grains. Only 6 barrels of this whiskey were made, and they were aged for more than 5 years in 3 different types of barrels. It's available at the Distillery in Chattanooga and online, while supplies last, for $69.99 a bottle. 3 Chord Bourbon is coming out with the latest release in its Backstage series in a collaboration with the Allman Brothers Band. It's a blend of straight bourbon whiskeys finished with toasted peach wood and was inspired by the legendary Allman Brothers Band album Eat a Peach. It's available to order online, and we've posted a link in the show notes for this episode at whiskycast.com. It'll be available later this year at select retailers. College football season is around the corner, and Notre Dame fans will be interested in the latest release from Ireland's Teeling Whiskey Company. Teeling and Notre Dame Athletics have collaborated on a new bottle of Teeling's small batch Irish whiskey featuring the Notre Dame logo. It'll be available this fall with a recommended retail price of $34.99 a bottle. The Balvenie has released the first edition in the new Balvenie 50 collection. Just 125 bottles will be available for the single cask bottling from 1973. Maltmaster Kelsey McKechnie selected a refill butt for the first edition. Next year's release will include some of that whiskey blended with another 1973 American oak cask, and the third edition, to be released 2 years from now, will include whiskey from a 1974 American oak barrel in the blend. The price tag in the UK is £42,500. It's available exclusively at Harrods until September 12th, when it'll go on sale at select retailers worldwide. And Springbank doesn't release single-cask bottlings very often, but a new collaboration with the Scottish rock band Travis hits the market this coming week. The band performed at Kilkerran's 20th anniversary celebration last month, and the 26-year-old bourbon cask-matured Springbank will go on sale Wednesday at the Springbank website for £1,250 a bottle. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Let's check the calendar and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. Whiskey Live Perth is this coming Friday and Saturday in Perth, Australia. Sagamore Spirit Distillery's monthly Whiskey on the Waterfront party is this Saturday in Baltimore, Maryland. Whiskies of the World is in Boston on Friday, August 23rd, followed the next day by the Chicago and Denver Summer Whiskey Festivals and the American Whiskey Show in Sydney, Australia. Finally, Whiskey and Barrel Night at the Games is coming up August 31st and September 1st in Pleasanton, California. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
Every year, Dewar's, the official Scotch whiskey of the U.S. Open Championship, rolls out a special limited edition whiskey to celebrate that year's tournament. The 2024 championship wrapped up in June, but the 2024 Dewar's 19-year Pinehurst edition is available now, and you don't want to miss it. This year's 19-year whiskey is double-aged, then extra-matured in rye casks, offering a rich profile with notes of pear and heather honey. There's a hint of spice in there, too, along with a dusting of cinnamon and cocoa powder. It's a sensory delight for any true whiskey or golf fan. So trust me, my fellow aficionados, grab a bottle and enjoy a whiskey crafted with the same skill and precision that makes the U.S. Open legendary. Please drink responsibly. Copyright 2024. Dewar's Blended Scotch Whiskey, 46% alcohol by volume. Imported by John Dewar & Sons, Coral Gables, Florida.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Oban and the Classic Malts lineup. Brora Distillery in the Scottish Highlands sat idle from 1983 until 2021, when the distillery reopened after 4 years of renovations. Its whiskey from the old days has been increasingly harder to find, and the distillery is parceling out releases sparingly to bide time until the new Brora whiskey is old enough to release. The first casks of that new distillate turned 3 years old this summer and are starting to be sampled as part of the Eras of Brora tour at the distillery. Andrew Flatt is the distillery's host and joined me the other day on a Zoom call from Scotland. So Brora is 3 years old now, or at least the new Brora.
Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? I mean, that's a real that's our first massive milestone. 3 years old, we've finally become whiskey again. So it's, just a really proud moment for everybody here at the distillery, really.
And you're actually producing peated malt again, correct?
Yes, this is one of the nice things, Brora always had those three distinct flavour profiles in the past, and we're working our way through and recreating them all. So for the first while, we were looking at that really fruity, waxy character that underpins Brora. But quite recently, we've gone back to a peated style, a lightly peated style. And that's the first time we've had a peated style run through the distillery since 1981. So it's been a long time coming, but the peat is back.
Let's go through the history of Brora.
Of course.
It started back in, I think, let me check my notes here. 1819.
Yeah, originally founded in 1819, but as Clynelish Distillery. So we were the original Clynelish. So founded by the Marquis of Stafford, the local landowner, designed to give a ready market to all the local farmers for their grains. It wasn't until 1968 when New Clynelish was built. Then we've changed the name into Brora. So the history is quite confusing, but when you lay it out in the timeline, it simplifies itself.
It's always sort of been confused with that distillery across the street in Clynelish.
Yeah, I think it's something that never fails for visitors to pick up on, is how close the distilleries are. They genuinely are right across the road from each other, and to have them both called the same thing for a while. And let's not forget, for a while they were running as Clynelish A and Clynelish B, which adds to that kind of murky period. So it's something on the experiences that we guide visitors through, but it's certainly an area of confusion.
How many visitors are you getting through there these days?
Do you know what? We've been really popular, really busy. So we're attracting people. We've running 2 experiences just now. So the way it's looking is we do a lot of private visits, and we offer public slots as well on a couple of different experiences. So I'm flat out anyway, so keeping busy.
Let's go through those experiences. The Eras of Brora tour is the Howland one, right?
Yeah, so Eras of Brora tour, fully immersive, 5-hour experience. We guide you through everything from the history of the village, the history of the 2 distilleries, I suppose. We look at some new makes, 3 different styles. Brora new make, obviously our peated new makes now a firm part of that session. We've got a fully immersive production tour. We go around the distillery, often joined by the master distiller as well, and giving visitors the chance to get hands-on, to work alongside the operators, to use the equipment and to interact with the production process. We've got warehouse tastings, and then private tasting of the triptych in our dining room. And then we have, we're lucky to work with an excellent food and beverage partner. So we have a chef comes in and we have a fantastic 3-course lunch just to round off the day. So a complete experience, you would say.
And then there's the basic tour, right?
You call it basic, but it's comprehensive as well, So we're in for a production tour for around about an hour or so, go around the distillery. Again, the chance to get hands-on. and then a warehouse tasting of limited edition Brora Expression. At the moment, that will be our second distillery exclusive, but we can always flex for visitor demands, so it'll be nice to give people a choice.
How does that new make spirit taste?
In my unbiased opinion, fantastic. We've been looking back at it, and the level of scrutiny that we have on the project. You know, when you come and visit the distillery, you'll see the effort we've put into restoring the buildings, restoring the equipment, but the judgment will come on the spirit itself. You know, so it's something we've really taken our time on. You know, and having spent the last 3 years really looking at that fruity, waxy character. And then, of course, and then now moving on to that peaty character, which we're very, very proud of indeed, you know.
What's the third style?
The third style came from, well, it's that wonderful style of the early 70s, when we have that really kind of earthy kind of style, you know, prominent in 1972, which is pretty much what you would call the golden vintage of Brora. And it's one there. It'll probably be the hardest to replicate, but it'll be. I think if Brora was a play or a film, 1972 would be the major character. You know, it was the legacy that gave us the distillery. You know, I mean, I believe that some of these fantastic 1972 Broras were the reason the distillery was still spoken about even through closure. So for us, that's going to be a very, very important one to master and bring back.
How hard is it to remaster those old styles?
It's not without its challenges, I would say. But I think what you have to do when you have, let's call it a problem such as this, you look at the answer and you look at the question, you know? So we still have casks of Brora, so we know what the end result is. We've still got blueprints from the old distillery. We've got first-hand accounts from, you know, our former colleagues that used to work there. So you can sense check everything and run it through backwards and forwards. You know, when you have the question, then you can use that to work out the answer. But you can reverse engineer then each part of the process, you know, and we can go back. We're lucky to have people such as Dr. Jim Beveridge, now retired, but he was a key component of the project. He really was. He could use his mental Rolodex from back when he was first looking at Brora New Make, you know, at the start of his career, and to have that knowledge still in the business to help us and guide us with, you know, what we're doing now. That's fantastic, you know.
There's a new Brora out now that's only available at the distillery, the 44-year-old Untold Depths. Tell me about it.
Sure. So this is our second distillery exclusive. So limited to 150 bottles worldwide and available, as you say, only from the distillery. So it comes from that wonderful age of peat as well. So it's 1977 specifically. And it comes from that wonderful peated era, akin to Talisker in its kind of like peating levels, just where the Brora character really, really shone. So it's quintessential Brora, I would think.
And it's 10,000 pounds a bottle, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Are you worried that Brora is going to be overpriced or priced out of the range of many people who would love to have a taste of it?
You know what? That's a really interesting question, Mark, and I do see where you're going with that. But what I think we have to remember is that, you know, these are very old, very, very special drops. You know, every time someone comes to the distillery and we try some, there's less of it. There will only be less. So, yeah, I see where you're coming from, but I think you have to understand that there are certain vintages of Brora now that we have very, very limited stocks left of.
What's the oldest Brora you have in hand?
That would be telling. That would be telling. I mean, you'll have seen the Brora Iris from the other year, the 50-year-old 1972. But I know, like, we're talking limited amounts, single digits left of casks from some years. Some of our Prima and Ultima releases are, in fact, the very last of those years entirely. So, it's just a question of using these as best as we can to sort of, I don't know, make best use of the last of our stocks.
You started out as a blogger. How much fun is it to be a distillery host now and to be able to immerse yourself in Brora?
Genuinely, it's the best job in the world. It really, really is. I mean, I never, when I used to write as a blog, it was a sort of moonlighting from my day job at the time. And I'd never really had any aspirations to work in the industry. It was just nice to be able to dabble, you know? And then I think it was at Highland Whiskey Festival in 2017, I was invited to a tasting at Brora, not long after it had been re-announced that Brora was coming back. And it was just sitting there in the old filling store, trying these fantastic old Broras. And they're just in the place they were created, you know, in the space in which they were filled into cask before they rested for, 38, 40 years. And it was a road to Damascus moment for me. You know, I could sit there and see what this project was all about. It was bringing back something amazing. And that moment of realization is now what I get to do as a job for other visitors at Brora. So it kind of completes this wonderful circle.
Sort of like a kid in a candy store.
Yes, that's exactly what it's like. That's exactly what it's like now.
What's the most unusual visitor experience you've had with a guest?
That really would be telling, to be fair. What happens in Brora stays in Brora. But I think the key thing I'd like to say is, when you come to Brora, it's your experience, it's not mine. You know, so I like to take a little bit of time, get to know the guests as they come in, chat with them over coffee, and try and figure out what they want from the tour. You know, so it turns out we can flex it to what they're looking for. So if they really want to understand the production, then maybe on the day we can expand the production part of the experience a little further. Maybe they want to learn a little bit about the history of the village. Maybe they want me to fully explain the relationship between the two distilleries so they understand it. But there's nothing there that means we have to be on a strict timetable. So it really is about making it their experience.
Is there any rivalry between you and the guys across the road at the Clynelish Visitor Center?
It's all friendly stuff, really, you know. But a little competition doesn't hurt.
How are things over at Clynelish these days?
Fantastic, yeah, super busy. So again, they were improved by the large investment in all of our visitor centres over the last few years. So it's fantastic to see how busy they are, and just the reaction on the new experiences there and the new visitor centres been immense.
I think that about does it. Anything else you can add I didn't ask about?
Not entirely too sure. I think one thing I would like to say is that as part of the experiences now at Brora, the Eras of Brora experience, you are trying samples from the first casks that we distilled at Brora on the reopening, which I think is an important point to make. So you are trying Brora single malt once again. So I think, that's something I'd like to kind of like put into the interview if we could.
Of course. How does that 3-year-old taste?
The 3-year-old's fantastic. And I think one thing we like to do at Brora as part of the whole experience is to play around with the timelines. So quite proudly, we're now adding in a tasting moment of our 3-year-old into the Eras of Brora experience. So you'll be able to see the relationship from new make to just turning into whiskey to then what we should be looking like. It's this wonderful transition of the past and the future both at the same time.
Thanks to Brora's Andrew Flatt for joining us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Oban, a deliciously smooth single malt, known for its coastal charm and Highland heritage, loved by whiskey lovers worldwide. Discover Oban's full lineup at malts.com. Let's start the What I'm Tasting This Week department with the new Four Roses limited edition small batch bourbon. As we heard during the news, it's made from whiskies 12 to 20 years old, using 3 of the 10 Four Roses recipes, and it's bottled at 54.1% ABV. The nose has a nice honey sweetness with touches of brown sugar, vanilla, and a hint of hazelnut. The taste has a nice balance of fresh berries, white pepper, and cinnamon spices, a hint of citrus fruits, and honey. The finish has lingering spices, hints of garden herbs, and a touch of honey. I'm scoring the Four Roses 2024 Limited Edition Small Batch Bourbon a 94. Next up, the Woodinville Whiskey 8-year-old bourbon that I also mentioned during the news. This one is bottled at 50% ABV, and the nose has touches of toasted oak, caramel, leather, tobacco, dark chocolate, honey, and a hint of mint. The taste has a nice balance of cinnamon, brown sugar, caramel candy, and red apples, and adding a few drops of water opens up dark chocolate and vanilla notes as well. The finish is long with touches of cinnamon and brown sugar. I'm scoring the Woodinville Whiskey 8-year-old bourbon a 93. And finally, let's look at the new Knob Creek Bourbon Times Rye. It blends Knob Creek's 9-year-old bourbon with its 7-year-old rye, and it's bottled at 56.5% ABV. Bourbon and rye combinations are nothing new, but the nose on this one is well balanced, with touches of baking spices, cocoa, honey, vanilla, and a touch of oak. The taste is spicy and chewy with cinnamon, clove, and allspice notes, balanced by cocoa, apples, brown sugar, and vanilla. The finish is long and dry with lingering spices, and I'm scoring the Knob Creek Bourbon Times Rye a 93. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of more than 3,700 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
So, in Spain, they call Redbreast Petit Roco. It's me, but a touch more exotic. Kind of like a Redbreast PX edition. Finished in Pedro Jimenez casks, adding a velvety and decadent dimension. You know, I won't lie. A climate like this makes me wish I was a migratory bird.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's open up the inbox and see what people are talking about this week. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey. I posted a photo of the Woodinville 8-year-old bourbon on social media after the Whiskey Fairy delivered it the other day. Christopher Murphy posted this comment on LinkedIn. True farm-to-glass company right there, and one of the best bangs for the buck. 5-year product at 90 proof for around $40 retail. Can't beat it. And Mark Shaw added this. Love Woodinville bourbon, especially the port finished. I haven't seen the 8-year-old in my market yet, but I'm sure it will be great. Once again, that 8-year-old goes on sale at the Distillery this coming Saturday and hits retailers next month. And our friend Mr. Pye posted a photo of a nearly empty Blanton's bottle in the WhiskyCast community app with this comment. Decided that there is no point in holding on to favorites. You're here for a good time, not a long time. Blanton's Gold Edition Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Have a great weekend, folks. Well said, my friend. Well said. If you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, download the free WhiskyCast community app and join the conversation. You'll find it in your app store. You can also find us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, and the email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey on the web at waterfordwhiskey.com.
That's the sound of our whiskey growing on Dunbell Farm, County Kilkenny. We know where every grain comes from. Only Irish barley, one farm, one terroir at a time. Waterford Whiskey, the most naturally flavoursome single malt.
Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. A barrel of whiskey has gone into near space for the first time. Strato comes from Colorado's Mile High Spirits, which sent the barrel into the stratosphere on board a World View rocket 3 years ago. The barrel reached a peak altitude of 107,000 feet above the Grand Canyon on its 4.5-hour mission, but more importantly, it hit 76 degrees below zero Fahrenheit, which may have had the biggest impact on maturation. The whiskey inside was 5 years old when it was launched and spent another year in the barrel after it came back. Mile High Spirits founder Win Farrell told the Denver news site Westward that the whiskey picked up unique flavors that, quote, don't exist on Earth. Strato goes on sale at the Distillery August 22nd with a price tag of $300 for a 50 ml bottle and a custom shaker. Insert the eye-rolling emoji here. By the way, the $75,000 a bottle space whiskey we reported on a couple of years ago, it has yet to reach the launch pad. If there's something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can use the WhiskyCast community app. Download it today from the Apple and Google App Stores. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
The 2024 release of Dewar's 19-Year-Old Champions Edition is out now, available at Dewars.com. Get it while you can and appreciate every double-aged rye cask finished dram. Please drink responsibly.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever go out drinking with a peacock? Always the same. Few too many, tail feathers come out, drinks get knocked over, bartender's not happy, night's over before it started. All I'm saying is, don't be the peacock in your group.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2024, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.